for so long, we've kind of tried to make ourselves fit into the model that's been given to us by male voices. You think about, pretty much every single massive sporting moment that this country and this culture is built on has got male voice telling us what's happening, even if it's Kathy Freeman in the race. I want to see a world where, there's alternative calls and I'm hearing women's voices and non-binary people telling us what it's like to watch someone like them, take a massive mark or, hit their straps or even, ride in the Melbourne Cup, whatever it is.
G'day guys, coming up on the show today are sisters Lucy and Emma Race. Lucy and Emma are the co-founders of Making the Call, which is an organisation that develops and delivers pathway programs for women and non-binary people in sports media. Additionally, they are the co-creators of the award-winning Outer Sanctum Podcast, and between them they are public speakers, broadcast journalists, board members and producers, just all-round media weapons. Today, we dive deep into their cohort program, Making the Call. We find out how it came to be, where they got their inspiration from, how they developed the content, and how it's grown from strength to strength. Plus, of course, how you can get involved. Lots to look forward to in this one, so let's go.
I started volunteering.
It's all about who you know in sport.
Am I going to be calling the last 10 seconds of the grand final?
You can connect with the interviewer. The hand goes up when they've got to make a decision.
Having a network is one of the most important things you can do.
I didn't necessarily follow my passion. I followed my curiosity.
Once you've worked in sport, there's no going back.
And then lo and behold, before I left, I got offered too.
Hello and welcome to the SportsGrad Podcast, the ultimate guide to make it in the sports industry, brought to you by Deakin University, home to the world's #1 sports science school. My name is Ruben Williams and I'm a previous Cricket Australia employee, and now I help hundreds of people get jobs in the sports industry and find out how other people got their job in sport and how they've grown their careers. And so in our episodes, we tease out their careers, find out what decisions they made and their habits, all these different things that made them great and got people to the heights of the sports industry that they have achieved. Now, if you've been following along on LinkedIn, you might have seen that I have recently touched down in London. I've been here for a couple of days now and spent the first couple of days catching up with friends over here. I'm a big Chelsea Football Club supporter, and so I've been fortunate enough to catch up with Paris, who works in the events team over there, and get a quick little tour of the stadium, which for those who don't know is just around the corner from where I happened to be born way back in the day. So I am Chelsea born and bred, so to actually come back to the stadium and check it out was a cool little experience for myself. But I'm in London for the next couple of weeks, and then I'm going to be in Paris for the Olympics as well, and then come back to London for the Premier League too. So if you are around, please let me know. It'd be great to catch up. Otherwise, if you are not following us on LinkedIn, feel free to. You can connect with us and hundreds of others working in the sports industry. And if you are not following SportsGrad, I'd encourage you to jump on that. And if you are not a member, I'd love you to go and check out the SportsGrad Community, because it is an amazing place for people to start their career in the sports industry. And there's always plenty going on and always plenty of people who are having some great success. And as is tradition at the start of these podcasts, we love to dive in and find out who are the people who are out there having success in their career from the community. So I've got a few people to call out today. The first person is Ethan Wren. Ethan is a long-time member from Perth, moved over to Melbourne a while back and enjoyed the premiership success of Collingwood, having worked as a part of the membership team there. He's gone back to Perth and has just got a job as a membership and ticketing administrator for the Perth Wildcats, the biggest basketball team over in the West. Then we have Amritpal Singh, who has just got a new job as a program officer at the Australian Sports Commission. Now, this is outstanding because Amritpal was one of the very first members to join us. And I remember when Athletics Australia came knocking 3 years ago and said, hey, we need someone to be our school's officer. And I said, Amritpal's your guy. And he's enjoyed 3 years working at Athletics Australia. And now he's leveraged that into a role at the Australian Sports Commission. So well done to you, Amrit. And finally, Billy Lewis. Billy was on the panel of our International Women's Day event at the start of the year. She's an absolute gun, and she has just got a new role as a performance and rehab intern at Athletes Authority. So well done to you, Billy. Now, inside the community, if you are a member and you're looking forward to all the events that are coming up, here's a few that you can look forward to. Pro Speed Networking is happening tonight. That's Monday the 15th of July. We've got Rookie Speed Networking happening next Monday. And we've also got a career Q&A coming up with Lyndall McInnes, who is a project manager for the Australian Olympic Committee, coming up this week. So if you want to hear about everything that's going on in the lead up to the Olympic Games, make sure you jump on that. And after the success of the presenting masterclass that we just had with Ankita Karingulekar, who's worked with the Mumbai Indians and Cricket Australia and Mumbai City FC, we are continuing with our presenter series. And Kim Ramnath, who has been on the podcast, who's a Formula One content creator, she's coming to give us a social media masterclass on the 12th of August. All of those events are happening at 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. So if you want to jump on them, check out the events page in Discord. Otherwise, if you want to stay up to date with everything that's going on at SportsGrad, whether it's events or new podcasts or anything else that's coming out, make sure you jump on our newsletter. sportsgrad.com.au/newsletter is where you can get it. And there is also a link in our show notes to subscribe. All right, that's enough for now. Time for Emma and Lucy. Grab a pen. Let's go.
Are you aiming for a future in sport? Be ready to transform the industry. Study with Deakin and be prepared to redefine what it means to work in sport. Deakin's School of Exercise and Nutrition Sciences is ranked #1 in the world. So if you want to turn your passion for sport into an impactful career, get ready to push the limits of exercise and sports science, sport coaching, sport development, sports management, nutrition sciences, physical education, and more. Apply now to study at Deakin in 2024.
Grace, welcome to the SportsGrad Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
It's so nice to be here. Thanks, Ruben.
I was particularly happy to read and see when doing research for this podcast that both of you are mad Hawthorn supporters, which as am I. And in particular, Emma, you are the #1 ticket holder for the Hawthorn Football Club. So this is a bit of a fanboy moment for me.
Well, it's a thrill for me, and we just, on behalf of the club, would like to thank you for your service over the journey, and we look forward to a long and happy union together, and we're all flying high at the moment. I mean, lid is well and truly on, but it's exciting times, and noticing that you're taking a mid-year holiday so that you've freed up for September.
Exactly. I'll be back. That's right. Where did your supportership of the Hawthorn Football Club start for both of you? Is your whole family going for the Hawks, or where did that begin?
Yeah, so we're from a family of Hawthorn supporters. Our grandparents were all Hawthorn supporters. We had one auntie who was an Essendon supporter, so you can imagine how that went. But she held her own. So it's actually, it's trite to sort of say, but football's family for us. And that's why, Hawthorn being the family club actually really resonates, because it's all about family time. When I think about football, I think about sitting in the Outer with my family and my sisters.
Amazing. Well, I'm in safe company today, so that's great to know. But Emma and Lucy, we always kick off every interview with our quickfire questions, just to help people get to understand a bit more about you and your background. So I'll get both of you to answer these. And the first question is, what was your first ever job?
Mine was Kmart on the fitting room door, closely followed by McDonald's.
Classics, absolute classics, Lou. Mine was Baskin-Robbins at ice cream.
Love it. And what did you guys both study at university?
I did a Bachelor of Arts with a double major in English literature and history, which has served me very well.
And I followed in my big sister's footsteps and did the exact same thing, except I majored in English and visual arts.
Love it. Loving the parallels.
But both proud Monash alumni.
Wonderful. And your favourite sporting moments?
I think we might have a similar one here. It's got to be that first game of the AFLW when I think back to it, and that lockout and the crowd and just the electricity that was coursing through the Outer. I can still picture it. I can still feel it. It still gives me shivers.
Yeah, we're really sounding like we're identical twins here, Ruben. But I think because the origin story of everything that we've ever done, is so based in family and the time that we spend together. Mine is also the first AFLW lockout game, because it just changed the world for us. But I will add on top of that, the first time we saw Hawthorn women run out onto the field and in a brown and gold jumper, it was truly something that I never thought that I would see in my lifetime, and that's also changed my life.
Amazing. I remember the uproar when we didn't first get a license, and it took a bit of time, but it's good to see the girls out there now. And what's one of your favourite interview questions that you like to ask of candidates?
I love asking people, what is your why? Why are you here? Why do you want to do this? I think it just gets to the crux of I guess, why you're in the room. And it's something that is sometimes hard to answer, but most people, I think, have that. They know what it is.
For me, it's always around who inspires you or where do you get your inspiration. I am completely obsessed with seeing things made new all the time. My inspiration is always Beyonce, even in a sporting setting. And, she's constantly reinventing herself. So I'm always looking for how you can find something new. So looking for inspiration in other forms of art or life, even history, retrospective things, nostalgia, things like that. So I'm always really intrigued. I think it tells a lot about a person by what inspires them.
Nice. I believe it was Emily Jackson, who was the head of legal at the FIFA Women's World Cup last year, who referenced Rihanna in a similar sort of question as well. So good to know we're getting full pop culture coming up in these quickfire questions. What is one book or podcast that you'd recommend that's helped you in your job?
I am a huge fan of How to Fail by Elizabeth Day, and I think I love it because she speaks to a broad variety of guests, and focusing in on what people, what they've learned from their failures is always a really interesting framing. But I also am really inspired by her because I think she's an incredible interviewer, and she brings empathy, she brings such wisdom. She's a writer as well, and I'm a huge fan.
I'm obsessed with podcasts. I'm always listening to something. And without this sounding like it's an infomercial, obviously the Outer Sanctum podcast is my favourite podcast of all time because it has been more beneficial for my growth and development and the way I've learned things, just because of the women that I surround myself with on that podcast. And so I guess I don't want to just name check our own pod, but that has truly been the biggest growth moment in my career. But I'm going to also throw in a left field one and say I subscribe to Masterclass, which probably a lot of people would see popping up in their social feeds saying, please subscribe to this. And it's so worthwhile. And the one that I go back to all the time, believe it or not, Ruben, is Sarah Blakely, who invented Spanx. You may not know what Spanx are. You may know what Spanx are. But her origin story and how much she believed in her product and how she got it out there, how she found and built an audience. I always find something new in that podcast listening to her, and it's a completely different, mindset of consumer kind of product. But I'm completely obsessed with her.
Love it. No, I've definitely been getting the masterclass ad, so it's good to know that it's actually worth a price point. And Sarah Blakely is someone who I've taken inspiration from as well, because I believe she bootstrapped Spanx at the age of 26, and I was about 26 when SportsGrad was kicking off. So I thought, well, if there are other people out there who can do it, well, let's go. So no, she's a great one. What's one platform that you use in your job that you couldn't live without?
Mine is so boring. It used to be Twitter. When Twitter became X, it's become less useful, in my opinion, and so I'm using it less and less. But this is so boring. But Google Docs, when you work in isolation, it's so hot. Google Docs is so hot, especially when you can't work out what was your login and where is the link and have I shared it and all of those things. But it actually, what I love about it is when you're collaborating and when you're working with someone on a project, and when you're you're taking different pockets of time, you're working at different times, you're in different locations, it actually makes it possible. So yay to Google Docs.
I totally thought then, because Lucy gets stuck having to do all the stuff that I consider boring in our business, I thought you were going to say MYOB for sure, or QuickBooks.
We don't even use that.
It's a little bit better. See, I don't even know.
You didn't even know that we don't use that.
In a notepad. Mine would be Instagram, because I'm constantly Insta stalking sports people. and other broadcasters. And I get a lot of inspiration from just reading things that other people are doing. And I probably don't do reels and stories that much myself, but I really love seeing how people use the medium. And there's just so many innovators and artists that are using it in a really fascinating way. I'm always terrified that I'm going to wake up one day and it will be gone or something like that. There was a while that I was curating the Outer Sanctum podcast Instagram page, and it was a real labour of love. And I sometimes look back at it lovingly like I had my own art gallery.
Love it. And if you had 30 minutes to pick anyone's brain, who would it be and why?
Oh, this is a really hard question. But when in this moment, I would say Billie Jean King. And the thing I love about Billie Jean King is she's older and wiser, and I'm loving the wisdom of older women. And she's somebody who has always cared about equality, and she's really worked in that space for such a long time. And the thing that I think I really admire about her and what I'd really like to talk to her about is her ability to bring people along. And I think that is a skill that we need at the moment. I think the moment calls for it. So I would love to spend 30 minutes with her. She could also help me on my volley. It's not good.
I want to say Beyonce, but I would never actually want to waste 30 minutes of her time. I'm like, she's got bigger things to do, so I don't want her to spend 30 minutes with me. So I'm actually going to say Juliet Slot from Arsenal FC. I'm completely obsessed with how she's packing out stadiums and how she's really leading the charge on that, and how we pack out stadiums week in, week out for the domestic competitions is what keeps me up at night. So Juliet Slot at Arsenal, I'm coming for you.
Wonderful. Two great women there. And you mentioned the Outer Sanctum podcast earlier, Emma. Those listeners who might be familiar with Rana Hussein, who came on the podcast last year, was also a part of that show, I believe. So for people who want to go back and connect the dots, Rana's in episode 238, I believe. So great to chat with the rest of the panel. Let's dive into what you guys are up to now. Emma, can I get you to explain, when people ask you, what do you do and what is making the call, how do you explain it to them?
It's pretty simple. We say that it's a pathway program for women and non-binary people in sports broadcasting. And then I guess the longer tagline is that the origin story is that as broadcasters ourselves in sport, we could see that there was pathways for women to become coaches in professional sports that we followed, or become board members, but we didn't see a pathway specifically created for the barriers that were there for women and non-binary people to equalise the gender in commentary boxes. And that was the catalyst, and that's how we try to execute with a tailored approach specifically for women and gender diverse people.
Amazing. And so what does that look like in practice for those people who aren't aware? How do you deliver that?
Yeah, we have a few different ways that we do it, but at the moment we are really lucky to have the contract from Change Our Game to deliver their Women in Sports media program. And that gives us the support, and that allows us to run programs for women and non-binary people in Victoria to go through a series of programs. And it's kind of goes from being hands-on, some online content, but then ongoing support. So there's a few different parts to it.
Awesome. Very, very cool. Well, we'll dive into a bit more of the specifics in later in the episode. But one thing I'm really keen to understand is the parallels in your career as two sisters who are working in a similar space. And perhaps Lucy, as the older sister, I was wondering if you might be able to speak to how you guys both ended up here, because you see people like the Williams sisters, for example, who probably just played tennis all day and end up both being two of the greatest athletes of all time, or Steve and Mark Waugh, but you guys both end up being sports broadcasters. So were you guys commentating games in the lounge room together? Like, how did your careers end up in this position?
I'd like to say we were probably singing Barbra Streisand in the kitchen, more like it. But I think we both took very different paths. We grew up at a time when there wasn't heaps of sporting options. So for us, we have another sister in the middle, and for the three of us, it was netball in the winter, Little Aths in the summer. And during winter, we would get changed after 3 games of netball in the back of the car and go out to Waverley and watch the Hawks, and then come home and watch that little, those little snippet replays at the end of the day. And we didn't actually play lots of sport together. We did a lot of riding our bikes, playing with the dog, that kind of thing. But in reality, there's an age gap between Emma and I that meant I was kind of looking ahead and doing other things. And I really didn't spend a lot of time looking back at what my little sisters were doing. But we've always been incredibly close. And I think probably the biggest clue that we were going to end up working together is we used to have a club that was held under my bed, and I was the president. Our middle sister was the treasurer and Emma was the secretary. And we had little spots where we had to sit under the bed for these meetings. And I think that's probably the biggest indicator of the fact that we were going to work together as we grew up.
There's actually something that you're completely walking past here, Lou, which is that there's a pleasure in cohort. Cohort is incredibly important to us, and it's a huge pillar of making the call. It's also a massive pillar of the Outer Sanctum and what we try to create in terms of the power and the strength of women supporting women. So when you grow up in the 70s or 80s, we're talking about gender equality now. Back then, if we said that we wanted to play footy, and I thought I was going to be an Olympian, and my whole family supported that deluded dream. The only kind of sports that, you could have thought about that in was netball or potentially tennis. There wasn't too many options. I was really good at the 70-metre sprint. I was devastated when I found out that 70 metres wasn't an official Olympic event. But for me, at least, being the youngest of the family, I always had constant support of these 2 older women, girls, who just championed me in anything that I ever wanted to try. And that really is, for me, it's kind of embedded in me, this absolute belief in the power of that and making the call. I think that's what, we probably will dig into this, but that really is what sets making the call apart from other programs, is that we're on call 24/7, and the same for really anyone that we interact with in football or women's football. And whether that's through gender equity work with Our Watch, or whether it's through making the call, whether it's through the podcast, we really believe in the power of women's voices and the power of women supporting women. And for me, at least, that's been my experience growing up. I never thought there was anything I couldn't achieve, because not only did I have 2 awesome parents, but my 2 older sisters raised me in kind of in the social and emotional ways of being an incredibly powerful woman who wants to support other women, if we've got the opportunity.
Wonderful. And where did the broadcasting influence come in? Were your parents broadcasters, or was it just, Lucy, you happened to be interested in it first and everyone followed suit? Where did that start to become a part of your lives?
Well, no, I actually wanted to be a journalist and didn't follow that path. I ended up, doing this degree in English Lit and history, and probably if I was going to write, it would have been fiction, but I could never have written anything I wanted to read. So I went in a different direction. But I think for Emma, it's always been about performance, and Emma's always been somebody who really studies something very, very closely to see how it was made. I've always called her a maker. And, when she was little, she would watch movies over and over and over again. And not only did she then, she could recite the whole script, but what she was actually doing, I realise now, is she was trying to work out how they made it. And that is something that's been in her since she was really, really little, and that's what she uses all the time. But I think broadcasting is very much Emma's origin story rather than mine.
Yeah, and so the Outer Sanctum just came because we were having conversations in a group chat with a bunch of other Hawthorn fans. You should have been in the chat room, and it was lit.
Would love to.
And we started talking about footy, and it was a group of people who hadn't all met each other, and we were having really deep feminist conversations and really deep human rights conversations about football. And this was about 10 years ago. It was actually during Adam Goodes, the booing of Adam Goodes, that we all really, this kind of feeling culminated that, like, what are we going to do? We're going to walk away from the game. Are we going to keep buying memberships? Or, is there something we can do to kind of change it. And, through a series of different things that happened, we ended up becoming podcasters. But previous to that, I had been a broadcaster. I'd kind of worked for every network and every radio station since I was, I think, maybe about 22 or something. So I worked in full-time jobs in things like game shows at Channel 7, but at the same time I was always producing shows for Channel 31. I was on Triple R for 9 years and then moved to Sydney and hosted a bunch of TV shows and worked on Oz Stereo radio shows, and came back and was working on Nova, and went to the ABC for my first tour of duty about 15 years ago. And then we found our way back to the ABC once we started the podcast. But to be honest, I think when we were having those conversations in the chat group, there was kind of a culmination of things happening. And one of the things that happened, one of the things that had always been a blocker to me being a maker in my favourite medium, which was television, and then, I grew to love radio and broadcast so much, was that there was always a lot of gatekeeping in that. And there was only, when we were growing up, there's only 5 channels and all those kinds of things. So it was really hard to make things. But then it was kind of like an industrial revolution when podcasting and digital technology and platforms and phones and things like that started to make it really accessible. And I felt like I had kind of missed out because, to be honest, like Lucy's son is a musician. He can make a whole album from this room she's sitting in right now. And, had that been my experience, I think, my life might have been quite different. But I realised that we had the power to really amplify our voices. And we all got together, this group chat all got together to talk footy and hang out. And someone said, we should do a podcast. And I just can't leave things well enough alone. And within 24 hours, I'd bought all the equipment and we started the podcast 3 days later. And we did not expect that it would do what it did. And it's really become the cornerstone of giving us access to a life that we never really dreamed that we'd have. And to be able to travel through this journey with my sister, and actually with our other sister, she was in the podcast earlier as well, has been just such a delight. It's been amazing. And it keeps us, you just can't bullshit a sibling, right? So, you can't be a broadcaster and not be telling your absolute truth when your big sister's sitting in the room, because they'll just call you on it, or, they'll just say something really embarrassing that reminds you of, who you really are.
I love that. Someone wise once said that inspiration is perishable, act on it immediately. So I'm glad to hear that you went out straight away after you had the idea for the podcast and got it set up straight away. That's a great initiative. You mentioned a bit of your background there. I'm keen to hear yours as well, Lucy. But of those different experiences, Emma, which one do you feel like you really cut your teeth in? Which experience really taught you your craft?
I love working live. So I'd have to say, there was a time when I was, of all the shows that I did, there was a show that I used to do on Channel 31. It was on my second tour of duty of Channel 31. It was a breakfast show and I was producing it and I was hosting it, and it was live for 2 hours every morning, Monday through to Friday. And I co-hosted it with some incredible Melbourne male comedians and some incredible guest hosts who've gone on to be absolute superstars, including the late, great Stella. And I think it was working live. I think it was just working live and having to work your way around technical difficulties, bad guests, people not turning up. It's early in the morning. I was getting up at 4:30 every morning to go and do this. And it was a labour of love, but we really created something, a whole bunch of young people just having a go. And pretty much anyone who worked on that show still works in the industry. And I truly believe in those community broadcasting stations because they really give you an incredible taste of what's possible. And you also learn every single job. So, throughout making the call, whenever people want to get experience, I'm like, take anything you can get voluntary, because you just kind of don't get, you don't have the pressure on you to have to perform, but just to be able to see what all the jobs are, it makes you much better at whatever the job is that you end up with finally. So, I worked as a contestant coordinator on The Weakest Link for a number of years at Channel 7. Now, it wasn't my favourite job, but because I was on the studio floor so much, I was in the production office so much, I learned every single job that every single person had, down to, things that I found fascinating. And this is how you know that you're in the right job, right? Like I was fascinated with my friend who was an assistant to the director who had a calculator that worked in minutes. I'm like, that's fascinating. It's fascinating to me. A 60-second calculator does my head in, right? So it's all those little things that you learn on the job. And I think definitely I realised how much I loved working live. And, that's terrifying for some people. So I realise now that that's it might kind of be my superpower, that I'm just not scared of it at all. As soon as the camera comes on, I just feel like I'm really myself.
Yeah, I can imagine working live would be a baptism by fire, having to do everything. And it sounds like you did for a long enough period that you've come across absolutely everything, so that when you're ready to step up from those community channels into the big leagues, nothing's, you're not unprepared for anything. My sister is currently running the Melbourne Uni radio station. I think she's producing a whole bunch of shows there. So I'm going to have to point her to some of your stuff and say, hey, this is where Emma's taken off from those levels too. And Lucy, how about for you? Tell us a bit about your background and where you feel like your craft in journalism really came from.
Yeah, so I've had a few different careers. I'm one of those people that's had a lot of different incarnations. I had some time in publishing on the sales and marketing side when I first graduated, and I loved that. I then went into communications, specifically medical communications. So worked with doctors and scientists on editing big research papers and things that were going into medical journals and doing a lot of work in that space. And after that, had a small business with our other sister. So when I look back, all of those things, and coupled with my arts degree and my curiosity, really I think has been the things that have stood me in good stead, because when we got to the podcast, I didn't have the broadcast skills, but I had other skills. And I think that I've used those not only in the podcast, but particularly in making the call. And there's something about owning a small business, which is like working in live TV, where you basically have to learn everything. I am absolutely terrified of maths, but I do the accounts, and you can't shy away from it. You just have to basically go, this is really hard. I'm just going to try and work it out. And I think that is something that I've really brought to broadcasting. I haven't found it easy. I do have opinions, which I'm happy to share, but the craft of broadcasting is something I'm still working on, and it's just absolutely amazing that I get to do it with my sister, who will coach me and will give me advice. I can take notes from her, but I also feel that sense of security. And so I think all of those things really go into where I'm at now. And I would always, say to people, especially younger people, try everything, because nothing's wasted. There's always something that you get from whatever role it is you're in, and it's always okay to change as well.
I know the Making the Call program, it covers a whole range of things, not just being able to speak on air. It sounds like your journalism background has been able to contribute to, say, how to write opinion pieces or research and preparation. Is that where, I guess, your background, Lucy, comes into the program?
The thing with Making the Call is that we don't purport to be absolute experts, and we do draw on lots of actual experts and broadcasters and journalists and media people. And I think it's something that stands the program in incredibly good stead, and why it works the way that it does is because we do have that buy-in and support from people who are working in the industry. I think for me, my skills that I bring to Making the Call is about executing something in terms of, delivering programs, designing things, pulling people together, making sure that we're doing all of the other things that have to happen, because it is basically a small business, whether it's in broadcast or not. But I do, the things I've learned about having an opinion online, I think are valuable. The things I've learned about practice and how you do it, and trying to get better, taking notes, all of those sorts of things are things I bring to it.
She's so amazing at she's just an incredible and voracious reader of news, and she can synthesize information really quickly. And to be really honest, most of the stories that we've broken on the Outer Sanctum have been because Lucy picked up on something really nuanced in another article or something that someone said. And it's her attention to detail and her ability to read between the lines, which is just such an inherent curiosity and it really, I guess, gives way to you getting some access into how smart she is and how big her brain is, despite the fact that she's a pinhead. So she brings all of that to the outer sanctum, but also to making the call. And people often adopt us as their work mums, and Marnie Vinyls does it all the time. I'm like, I'm too young to be your mum. What are you talking about? Actually, in reality, we could totally both be her mum, but I think they're really talking about Lucy because she's just so beautiful to be around. She's just got a incredible loving and caring spirit. Her house is basically a halfway house for musicians where every creative in the eastern suburbs is living at Lucy's house at the moment. So she cuts her teeth on a lot of different creative types. So she knows exactly how to support them. She's amazing like that.
That was a bit nice.
Amazing. Having spoken to a couple of journalists, it does sound like the preparation phase or the research phase does seem like an incredibly pivotal piece to being able to deliver whatever you're delivering, because you never know which little tiny segment of that you're actually going to need. So it's interesting to hear how your skill sets combine and kind of come together to form this awesome program. Just quickly, what's the name of your middle sister?
Felicity.
And Emma and Felicity, have you guys ever started a business? Because then you'd have the full trifecta of sister businesses.
It's a huge bugbear. She's the smartest of all of us, and she's off running her own race at the moment. So I feel like her time will come. Mostly we just send each other hideous memes that we would never make Lucy look at, because then she'd know how evil we both truly are. She's an absolute gun, and she's really she's really the smarts of this whole operation, let's be honest. We constantly contact her when we've hit a pickle or a jam, and she operates in the real world, unlike us when we just get to quote Bridget Jones' Fanny about with the press releases all day. And so we call her and just say, this is our problem, what do we do? And she's just got this really broad and strategic mind, and she's wicked as anything. So she always has a great comeback for us as well. So eventually we will, but, I feel like our lifelong journey is our business proposition together. By the time Lucy and I wrap up here, I'm going to be old and grey and ready to retire, I think. So she was on the podcast for a long time, so we did work together, but not nearly enough.
She's got the fastest wit. She is very funny and very sharp, amongst many other gifts.
Beautiful. Well, hopefully that time will come and we'll see an Emma Felicity business sometime in the future. Let's go into the program more specifically. Can you explain a bit about the curriculum? What do people go through when they first step into the Making the Call program? Perhaps, Emma, could you speak to that?
Yeah, so at the moment when we deliver it for the Office of Women's Sport and Recreation, which is also known as Change Our Game, it's, we have a set of principles and I guess objectives that we need to meet, and that informs that particular program. So I'll speak about that today, because I think that we do a few other things outside of that are also kind of core to the program that we've delivered to 101 graduates in Victoria. But the thing that we try to do, and when you were asking Lucy before about her background and, journalism and why it is that the course is so broad, is what we try to do is kind of look at what's actually happening in media at the moment, and then we try to tailor the skill set, because we know that traditional media is changing. When we first started the course back in 2020, we were doing a lot more with lecturers who were coming from traditional media, and some of those people in industry people have remained. You would know Chris Jones, who is the EP of cricket at Channel 7. He's been incredible for us, and also Kelly Underwood, who has been an amazing icon of women's sports broadcasting for such a long time in this country. And both of them come from really traditional media, but what we've noticed is that they now talk about the way that media has changed and how it has to change the output. So we try to think really broadly about a holistic industry where producers are essential, where people who are, maybe they're operating in the control room, maybe it's writing opinion pieces, maybe it's even just writing for the Footy Record. The way in which that male voices basically cover the landscape of sports broadcasting at the moment it's in every vertical, it's in every horizontal of digital, traditional, print, podcasts, in every technology, in every deliverable. So that's what we're aiming to upskill people into. And then you add into that the fact that all of our grads, apart from one of our first courses, which was specifically targeted for Australian rules football, we now take people from every different sport, any sport. We try to make sure that we're kind of covering off on multiple sports. And we also have a really strong a cohort of people who are from called backgrounds, or women and non-binary people who come from regional Victoria, because we also know that sport is such an important part and such an integral part of those regional areas in Victoria and, across Australia as well. So we take a whole lot of different influences, and then that's how we kind of try to make sure we're synergizing all that information, and then that's how we design each program. So no program is the same every single time. We do take our lead at times from the cohort, which is the people who have managed to apply and get through the process, which is managed by the Office of Women's Sport and Recreation, and so we do get inspiration by the people that are in the room. So at the moment we run an introduction course, but we also have an extension course. And the introduction course is, supposedly it's meant to be like a broad overview of the entire industry, which is such a hard thing to do because it's constantly changing and there's so many different facets to it. And the people who come through the door, they can be really experienced or they can still be at uni. Like there's a lot of ground to be covered between those kind of spaces as well. So the way that we design it is always influenced by what's happening in the media at this very moment, what the media trends are, and who's in the room. And then we try to tailor it. And then the ongoing support, which we talked about before, which is cohort, is really being accessible to people every single day of the week. And that is, we've got 101 grads. Someone wants to run an email past us before they send it off for a job, they'll send it and Lucy will proofread it and give feedback. If someone needs a contact for something like underwater hockey or something like that, I will go and find it. If someone, there's F1 stuff and they don't know who to contact, then we will do the legwork for them, because sometimes it's really hard to advocate for yourself and then still have the power to say, this is who I am and this is why I'd like to walk through the door. And so I think we kind of take the notion or the motif that men have been having these conversations while they've been playing 5-day test matches or while they've been out playing golf. And for women and non-binary people, that just hasn't been the experience. So how do we break that down? What does that look like for us? And what that looks like for us is a massive WhatsApp group of people who are constantly trying to support each other and dropping jobs in there. You'd notice that SportsGrad gets dropped in there a whole lot of times, and we've got a couple of people in our course now who are part of SportsGrad as well, and we think that's fantastic. We love it when people come from other areas because they bring in a whole other network. So I hope I've answered the question. Like it's never prescribed. We do have a series of people that we have used heaps, like Joel Peterson, who's an amazing play-by-play caller across basketball and football and cricket and soccer, actually, even I think he's even done horse racing. He has given so much time to this program, and people really, they sit down with him if they want to learn ball by ball or play by play. He really helps them with things like how to crunch their data and what to make their books look like, or how to have all the information on hand. And then Tess Armstrong from the ABC, she talks about producing for TV and radio and podcasting, and we think all of those things are equally as important. So we try to make sure that everyone gets a little taste of each one, and then we do heaps of follow-up time with them afterwards, one-on-one, to make sure that, they've got an answer to whatever the question is for them to take their next step, whatever that looks like.
I'll just add to that one of the kernels...
Is there anything to add?
Well, no, what I wanted to just add is that at the start, when making the call didn't exist, someone once said to us that men were beating down the doors for every sports media job that was on offer at certain broadcasters. And they said, well, where are the women and non-binary people? And we went away and really kind of thought about that and wondered, what is the reason that there are a whole group of people who aren't feeling comfortable to break down the doors? And so that sits at the heart of the program design to then demystify what sports broadcasting is, to really, because it's an enormous industry and there is so many different roles that you can apply for, and there are so many ways that you can be part of this industry. But it's a hard thing to really get a hold of if you're not sure about that. So that is part of it. The other part of it is for every single person who comes through our programs, we formulate a plan for them how they are going to get through that next door. And those next doors are very, very different depending on where they're at in their career, what their ambitions are, what their background is, what sport, all of those different things. So it means that of those 101 graduates, they're actually not always going for the same job. In fact, it's very, very rare when they are. They all are going out into different parts of the industry, and it's incredible to see the work that they're doing and the way that they bring each other along.
Yeah, one of the things that we identified was the barriers to women getting these roles, or women and non-binary people actually wanting to have these jobs, because we still look at, journalism courses at tertiary institutions are still absolutely populated by guys. There's very few women in these courses still, right? So you think about why is that as well. They're not seeing it as a viable job opportunity. They're not seeing it as a pathway for them. They don't see themselves in this. In a lot of cases, it's not safe. It's not culturally safe in a lot of these places where people have been working. We've heard stories that have come out about that in the last couple of years. The one thing that is also a barrier is that for such a long time in sports broadcasting, and certainly since we grew up, there's always been a scarcity. There's been one woman. If there's been any jobs for a woman on camera or behind a microphone talking about sport, there's only ever been one. And so they were really pitted against each other. And so the older generation of women in sports broadcasting in this country have done a monster amount of work on their own. And we absolutely stand on the shoulders of those people, like Anne-Marie Sparkman. I was just thinking about her the other day, or Dixie Marshall, Caroline Wilson, of course, and Corrie Perkin, and there's a couple that have just done so much work. Even Bridget Duclos for such a long time on the grill team. They were the only women that we saw. And, you think about that, they're all white women. There was one in every job. So why did anyone who grew up in our age group think that this was a viable opportunity for us to go into? And I think that kind of remains. So one of the keys is making sure that when we get the cohort together, everyone talks about what their goals are and where they've come from. And we all see that no one's going to cannibalize each other's opportunity, that this scarcity mindset is just complete bullshit, really. And the only thing standing in their way is opportunity. And these people work so hard. So many of them have built their own platforms. They come to us because they've never even had the opportunity to apply themselves to a group setting of learning these skills. And so I think that's what we offer as well, is just like a real reality check that if you're finding it hard, it's because it is hard. It's hard for men. It's hard for everyone. But then you add a couple of layers over it and it gets, increasingly more difficult to see yourself.
I remember growing up, like watching footy and cricket, and every single broadcast panel was just full of like ex-male players. And so I really appreciate the fact you speak to those people who have gone before you and can imagine how tough they would have done it. And I guess that really speaks to the importance of what you're doing to trying to create pathways to break that down and see more women visible in sports journalism and broadcasting too. So you're doing very important work, which is awesome. I also particularly love that because I believe this program's been going for 3 or 4 years now, and it doesn't sound like there's a set curriculum every time. You guys are adapting to what's happening in the media landscape each time. Whereas if you were to look at traditional education, say as a university, it might take 3 or 4 years to update the curriculum. Whereas you guys are very, very agile. Lucy, I was wondering if you could speak to how do you do the preparation for each new cohort and what you are going to teach them through it?
We bring a few things into it. We always look at our previous programs and really interrogate what went well and what didn't. We listen to the feedback of the people that have been through those programs. But I think it's really important for us to keep going back and looking broadly at the media landscape. And part of the work that we do in making the call is actually having those conversations and building those relationships with media organisations and people in people in sports media, with other broadcasters. And over time, we've found that we're speaking to more and more people from different platforms. We've noticed changes, and we really try to incorporate those into the programs. The other thing that we do is that, as Emma mentioned earlier, we really do look at the cohort and try to tailor the program to what they actually need. So in terms of the application process, in terms of some of the activities that occur in the program, we really do try to get to that information quite quickly, particularly in the more advanced courses. It's really important that we understand each individual and understand what the particular barriers or what challenges are and what their goals are, so that we can really try to bring in the content that we think is going to make the most impact, because that's what we're here for. We're here for outcomes. We're here for impact. We don't have a lot of time face-to-face, which is probably something that we would love that to be a bit different. But it's all about trying to really, I'm not going to say game the system, but it's about working out what everybody needs. So listening is really important.
Emma, you mentioned at the top of the episode that Instagram is one of your favourite platforms, and you love how basically anyone can be their own publisher these days. Like anyone can kind of be their own news outlet with the ability to create and distribute content. Is that something that is on the radar or is currently part of your program? Because, for example, Sarah Burt, who's been on the podcast and I believe has been part of your program, she's just started a series on TikTok speaking about the stories of people going to the Olympics. One of our other previous guests on the podcast is a girl called Kim Ramnath, who is an F1 content creator who's quickly grown her following to 50,000 followers. Is that sort of ability to be your own entity and to create, is that something you guys are noticing and putting in or looking into the program?
Yeah, that's always been a massive part for people who've applied for this course. There's been some amazing people who've started their own platforms and thinking about, Chicks Talking Footy on Joy FM or thinking about Beyond 90. That was, way before the Matildas were packing out stadiums and we couldn't get a jersey. That, as I said, there's no barrier when it's you doing it. And we really encourage people to do it if they have their own voice. The other thing that we're seeing at the moment as well, which is an absolute media trend, is you will get a platform on a mainstream media channel if you bring a sponsor, which is pretty amazing, to be honest. That's the way that the cookie is starting to crumble in this opposite direction, that mainstream media is trying to work out how they can keep themselves financially viable. My point to that is, if you can find yourself a commercial partner, build your own platform, get as big as you possibly can, and someone will come and buy you, because that's what we constantly see. So they're the things that I'm looking for in terms of trends on Instagram, but also with sports broadcasting and the way that, I'm really interested in the way that women can have a different voice and a different opinion, and the way that we see sports so differently, because for so long, we've kind of tried to make ourselves fit into the model that's been given to us by male voices. You think about, pretty much every single massive sporting moment that this country and this culture is built on has got male voice telling us what's happening, even if it's Kathy Freeman in the race. I want to see a world where, there's alternative calls and I'm hearing women's voices and non-binary people telling us what it's like to watch someone like them, take a massive mark or, hit their straps or even, ride in the Melbourne Cup, whatever it is. So, that's where they can demonstrate what they can do. It's where they can cut their teeth on it. It's actually the way of the future. And to be honest, when we look at broadcast rights coming up in the next couple of years, Ruben, who knows? Facebook could buy the broadcast rights to the footy. We don't know who's going to be the people who are left remaining, who've got the skill set. So, that's what I would say, that if you want this to be part of your life, then if you don't have a footprint that demonstrates that it is part of your life, it's a really hard sell, firstly. And secondly, the people sitting next to you, they're making it. They're already making it. They're just making it. They're doing it. They're doing the thing. And to be honest, that, as a broadcaster and a content creator myself, that keeps me awake at night. I'm like, I am striving for greatness, and there's just not enough hours in the day. And then I went and had 3 children and can't even make any TikToks because I'm so busy making school lunches. But, like even when we talk about the way that the courses have changed, Marnie Vinyl was in our very first cohort and did our extension program as well. She's now being cited by the lecturers who come from industry, by the industry people who are there to network and hire people, and by all of the cohort who come through as best practice, as I want the career that Marnie Vinyl's got. Now, she's got an amazing platform on The Age, but the stuff that she's doing on TikTok is setting her apart and getting her noticed in a whole lot of other areas that we couldn't have even imagined 2 or 3 years ago. So, and it's brave and it's gutsy, and I know that she cops a whole lot of heat for it and it would be exhausting and all those things, but she's offering up her unique voice in this space and it's finding an audience. And to be honest, like that's how the world's kind of aggregating at the moment.
Yeah, the creator economy is a fascinating space, and I think one that we'll see more and more people dip their toe into and become kind of independent people working for themselves, doing various different projects, bouncing around from place to place, which is exciting for many. I wanted to ask about the specifics of your curriculum and where you think it stands out compared to, say, other programs that you could go and do out there in the market. So is there one particular thing that you think making the call teachers better than anybody else?
Hello. Well, cohort, the power of the cohort, which I've mentioned on numerous occasions. It's kind of it's a magical mystery to how it works, but there's something about having that many people all supporting each other and working together. And you would know this from the meetups and the networking events that you have. There is a power when you get people together in the room and they all start supporting each other. I think it is maybe something about how quickly we can turn things around. Like we're not a slow moving operation. Like I think it's something about that, what you were talking about with the comparison with tertiary. Like we just have a zero downtime. The minute something changes in the industry, we're communicating that to our graduates and we're kind of adjusting accordingly. So whether it's teaching intersectionality or we notice that there's a new person on the market that can teach you how to be get the best performance out of yourself as a media performer, as a woman or something like that. Like we are moving on trends that we see, within a matter of hours at times. And the other power of that is that it makes sure that places are culturally safe. If we hear of things that are happening, when the event with Tom Morris happened that was broadcast and one of our own was kind of thrown under the bus, the power in that moment of the network of women and non-binary people in sports media in Victoria, but actually, nationally, it became, I felt like that we were a hub for that for a really long time in making sure that people got the support that they needed to want to keep going to work. And they're barriers that are not fun to talk about, but we need to understand that that's actually the real life landscape of what it's like to work in this industry and maybe in a whole lot of industries, to be really fair. So, I think it's that immediacy and the ability to turn around information really quickly and offer genuine and authentic support. Lou, have I missed anything there? I probably have.
The only other thing I'd add is I think that we've been really lucky to have genuine connections with industry and like real buy-in from media organisations, sporting organisations who see the value of what we're trying to achieve with this program. And we would not be able to be having the outcomes that we're having without that. And we're incredibly grateful for it. And that comes from relationship building. And, that goes both ways. We get a lot of support. We try to give people support. And I think the fact that we're able to be nimble and also to cultivate those relationships and have people really just want to give whatever they can to the program really is key. Because it wouldn't be possible without the generosity of all of our industry mentors and supporters and partners.
Is there any particular reason why you think perhaps those industry partners would be more willing to collaborate with your program than, say, a university or anything else out there? What is it that you think helps people warm to what you guys are doing?
Because they don't know where to find the women, because they're
True.
getting heat from the public. Like if you look on X or you look on any social platform now, the people who are actually devouring sport content, they're asking for more. They're asking for better. They're asking for more diverse. They're calling people out on stuff. And it's not about cancel culture, but they know that diversity of thought makes their broadcast better. It's really hard if you're looking at, it was only a couple of years ago when an AFLW broadcast team was all male, right? You just wouldn't see that anymore. You maybe sometimes out of Queensland if they're really struggling to get enough broadcasters on the day, or there's a couple of games or something like that. But it's really rare these days to not have someone who looks like the person who's playing in the commentary box. And, in the AFLW, of course, we've got a couple of gender diverse people playing. So, if broadcast knows that they need to have a diversity of lineups, and that's not just on camera or on mic, that's behind the scenes as well. And traditionally a lot of women have worked in production of media organisations, and heaps of them have worked in lots of different roles, but they're not always that visible, and they also don't always have the power to change the storytelling. So, when you see the success of someone like Daisy Pearce, who has been a mentor for us in the past, and how well received her commentary was when she was doing specials for Channel 7, it really resonated with a different audience, and they have got to find a different audience. And, I think that the globalization of sport and the offering and the competitive nature, and you were at Sports Next, you would have heard ESPN talking about this, is, how viewing habits are changing, and how the next generation of sports watchers are not watching siren to siren. And if they happen to watch even the highlights, they've probably also got their phone in their hand and they're gaming at the same time, or they're on a social platform. There needs to be an innovation in how you capture an audience, and people who have broadcast licenses have multiple platforms now to fill. So they need to offer a diversity. And, as we said before, people often ask the question, well, where are all the women? And the truth is, they're here. You call us and we'll find you someone who can hopefully, we get calls from industry all the time. We've almost become a job placement agency, which is not our intention at all. But when people contact us, sometimes we just don't have enough people on our books to be able to send them, and so we'll look far and wide to try and help someone, find the person that they're looking for, because regardless of whether they're a graduate of ours or not, that's for the greater good, So I think that that's why they keep coming back to us. And also, we want to support them because they're not getting it wrong because they want to get it wrong, or they don't have the answer, for any great patriarchal reason. It's just they're on the cusp of changing their industry, and it's a really hard thing to do. So we offer a service that no one else is offering in Victoria at the moment, at least. And so we know where the women are, and we know how to help you think about a diverse choice for whatever broadcast you're doing.
Yeah, even from a sports recruitment point of view, I can also attest to the fact that we get a lot of employers come to ask and ask us like, hey, can you just send us a bunch of female names, please? So to be able to know that there's a space specifically in broadcasting and journalism that helps those people directly is absolutely awesome. On that note, Lucy, where are some of the places that your graduates get jobs, and who are some of the success stories from the program?
There are so many. You mentioned, we've mentioned Marnie and Sarah. People like Bryony Dawson is someone who was in one of our earlier programs, and they are somebody who came to the program with an entertainment background and liked sport, but had never really got into sport, and have hosted the W Awards for the AFLW. They have been boundary riding through AFLW matches. They've been on global game shows and done all sorts of wonderful things. So I think that's one really interesting, case study. But then other people like, I'm thinking of Lauren Borden, who is now calling football for the ABC, did our program very early on. And I think, the other thing that is important to say is that the support that people get through other platforms and other programs all kind of goes into people's success. So someone like Lauren was able to call football through WARF radio and get experience there, and then be part of an intern program with the ABC. And so I get such a thrill when I hear Lauren calling the football. It's like, it really is just such a moment of pride, and it makes a difference to hear her voice. Other people are writing. So we've got people writing for things like The Guardian, for all of the newspapers, but writing for things like the Football Record, writing for things like different platforms where people are getting their news, people who are doing podcasts, people who are what have I missed, Em?
Oh, I'm thinking about how Gemma Bastiani was a stats guru who was basically collating stats about the AFLW because no one else was doing it. And she was just doing it because she loves stats so much. Now she works at the AFL full-time pretty much. She's hosting shows on the AFLW channel. She's writing for the AFL website. She's working across the men's and the women's, and is actually the oracle now for everything that nerdy that you ever want to know about AFLW. So thinking about how stats are also often really gendered, Champion Data doesn't always collect all the same stats for the W as it does for the M. It's starting to now. So that's been a massive one. Kate Robinson, even, who has the Being Biracial podcast, who then also did an internship at Tennis Australia and has been working as well on a new podcast that she's doing with iHeartRadio. So it doesn't necessarily mean that her voice is going specifically into sport, but it's often sport adjacent, and it's giving a platform to other, intersectionality is something that we make sure we cover off in the course. In fact, Rana teaches it and she's amazing at it. And so, to be able to give voice to other perspectives in whatever platform it's going into has been essential. Julia Montesano, who is now working as a content creator at Hawthorn Football Club, you would enjoy her work on the reg, I'm sure. She also won this international competition to call the basketball internationally, and so we're kind of moving. Oh, and then Amy was calling the women's baseball championships, and she's done it a couple of times, and then she actually put together the first all-women commentary panel that's ever happened in world baseball. It's just amazing. So they're all doing incredible things where, we've got people working in cricket that you would know as well, Emily and Laura, who are traveling the world. And, Mel Jones has been such an amazing mentor for us from the first second of this program. Is always looking out for new talent in the cricket space as well. So, there's kind of nowhere that you won't find a grad hiding behind a microphone or under a stack of papers somewhere. And, whenever we find out, what team they go for, what sport they really love, it's just so essential for us to make sure that the people who are, working in that space in the industry know that this person exists and is available. And, more often than not, they get a tap on the shoulder and they end up working in some capacity and kind of, giving it a new voice, which is, I guess that's the whole thing that we're looking for.
Amazing. And Bryony Dawson, I think, is the most energetic person I've ever met in my entire life. I saw her for the first time at the Melbourne Mavericks season launch party, and I saw her recently at the Super Netball over the weekend. I don't know where she gets it from, but she's just the most bubbly person I've ever come across in my entire life. So she's doing fantastic things. But I didn't realize how many people we've had in our podcast have been through your program as well. So if people are looking for an example of where they might be able to take their career, I think you mentioned Emily Collin from Cricket Australia. Has she been through it?
Yep, she has.
Yeah, so people can listen to what it's like to work in social media with the Australian women's cricket team back in episode 170, and then Sarah Birdie's episode 262, and V Trung, a current student, I believe, is in episode 253, and then the great Rana Hussain, people can find her in episode 238. So there's some good crossovers here, which I'm loving.
It's amazing. We loved seeing V walk through the door recently. What an absolute cracker of a human. We're just so glad that we get to work with her as well. We knew she was one of yours, and she has gifts on top of gifts. So I'm really excited to see what happens in her career.
She is an absolute superstar. We when we interviewed her on the podcast, we gave her an internship during the show because she said she was looking for an opportunity. It was quite obvious. It was quite obvious how good she was. So we're like, we'll snap you up.
That's so great. That's exactly how it should work. That did happen for us. It was so funny. In one of our courses last year, Sam Thompson came in from SEN, and we said, just kind of talk about the industry and the kinds of jobs that are available. Sam basically brought in a list of jobs that she currently had and stood there with a piece of paper like, yes, come and order. Yeah, I'll take your number, thanks. And just like sign people up on the spot. It was kind of crazy, but we loved her for it.
Love it. Awesome. I've really enjoyed this chat. It's been awesome diving into your program and how it's kind of come about. You mentioned that one of the key pillars of what makes your program great is the amount of industry connections that you have and the people that you bring in. My final question for you both is, based on the amazing guests who have entered the program, what is the number one piece of advice that you have heard from one of these people that you continue to reference or keep passing on time and time again? Lucy, I might throw to you first if you've got something ready.
Yeah, you've got to be passionate. You've got to really want this. There are a lot of challenges. It's a really rewarding space to work in, but you need to really be passionate because that is what will keep you going when it's tough. It's what will drive you to keep striving for getting better. It will help you to keep practicing. And I think that's actually been probably one of the most important things, that if it's something that you're just like, I'm not sure, it might be good, I'm not sure, it probably isn't the career for you. Got to be passionate.
Yeah, I'm going to actually use some advice that I heard recently that's changed everything for me, and it was actually from one of our graduates. It was not, and we've brought this person back a couple of times, Chelsea Ryan, who was in our first ever cohort and then also did our extension program, who's been commentating swimming, is a game day announcer for AFL and AFLW, and has also been producing athletics content, for live broadcasts as well. She's just an amazing all-rounder. I was on a panel with her at Swinburne recently, and she said, be specific. When you're writing or contacting someone to ask for help, be as specific as you can. So she gave this example of, and we always say that, like, making the call is the name of our business. We want people to make the call. We want them to call up people and, contact and say, how can you help me? And then can I, be on your call? Chelsea said she will contact someone like, say, the Vixens or whatever, and she will say, I've noticed that you've got these 3 games, these 3 home games are left. I would like to shadow someone on either this day or this day. I can be available. This is my skill set. Or can you tell me the name of the person who specifically I need to speak to for this role? And being specific makes it so much easier than if someone just rings and says, can you help me with my career? I mean, like, where do you even start with that? So the specificity of put that into
That's our
words
second
I can't
sister.
say.
Our sister specificity.
Exactly. So the specificity race of being able to, to actually work out what you're asking and really hone it down so that someone can either, can you help me? Yes. Can you help me? No. Move on. Find the right person who can. I just thought that was such wonderful advice.
Love that. There's some parallels in some of the content creation approach that I take as well. Whenever I'm writing something for LinkedIn, I always write at the top of my page, who for, so that. And I'll write in who for. So say it's for V Trung. I've written some pieces that might speak specifically to her so that, she learns more about how she can sell the experience that she's got today. And then that will help me write the piece of content. So I think life rewards specificity and a vague request or vague anything will leave you somewhere in the middle. So that is great advice to finish on, Emma. Thank you so much to both of you for coming on. I've loved learning about the program and hearing everything you're doing. I think what you're doing is extremely important work. It's really niche work, but it's such an impact that you guys are making, and the alumni that you guys are building up and the community that you guys are creating with all the support networks that come with it is just fantastic to see and to see it growing as well. And I think the the compounding effect of that over time is going to be such an amazing thing to see where that group can be in, say, 10 years' time, 15 years' time, let alone, 3 or 4 in the early days now. So well done to both of you, and hope to see it grow and grow and grow.
Thanks so much. We love your work as well and love everything that SportsGrad is doing, and really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, it's been amazing to watch your growth and also your courage at being able to step out and just take something on that's just so enormous and so professional. And also you give great LinkedIn. So all those things that you're doing, perfect.
Thank you very much. Well, we're going to have to go to a Hawthorn game sometime later in the year, or when the W season kicks off in September.
Absolutely love to.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Okay, guys, it's now time for Ask SportsGrad, where every week we'll answer a question from the community. And if you'd like to ask a question, you can become a SportsGrad member. Head to sportsgrad.com.au/community to join, and then add your question to the channel named Ask SportsGrad. Now, this one comes from Cody, and Cody says, where would I be able to find these volunteer roles? Is there a website that I can locate them on? I'm struggling to find out where I can get some opportunities to get my foot in the door. This is a great question. Now, some of these volunteer opportunities that we particularly advocate for, whether it be in grassroots or a university society or a charity or some other organisation who could really use your help that you can create an opportunity with, a lot of these don't get advertised. You won't find them on Seek. You won't find them on job boards. A lot of the time you have to go looking for them, and you have to go and network with people to find out what are they working on and find out what challenges do they have in their role at the moment. And then based on that information, you will need to see where you can insert yourself to help them out. And that's where you can create a volunteer internship role for yourself. So unfortunately, there's no silver bullet to this. There is no website where you can just go and say, hey, I want to volunteer in these different roles. The best volunteer roles usually come when you're able to identify an opportunity to insert yourself, create a plan to solve that problem, go ahead and do it, and come out with an example that's got plenty of initiative ingrained in how you went about solving that problem. So that is how I would do it, Cody. Now, if you want to ask a question or ask our friends in sport a question, of course, sign up to become a SportsGrad member. Each week we jump on a Q&A where you can ask people like Ankita and coming up Kim and Lyndall all about what they do and how they do it. So if you want to jump on those events that I mentioned at the top of the episode coming up this week, make sure you dive into Discord or put your name on the waiting list to become a SportsGrad member. And by the way, all these sessions get recorded. So when you join, you get immediate access to over 60 hours of exclusive content, which is kind of like Netflix for the sports industry. Until next time, find us on LinkedIn and give us some love with a rating if you enjoy the show. Subscribe on Apple and follow on Spotify. Until then, thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.
Hey friends, one last thing before you go. If you really want to make an impact in sport, then subscribe to the SportsGrad newsletter. Inside, we share all the latest job openings and networking events, so you're always aware of opportunities to land a job and grow your network. Plus, we share a Q&A with a professional on how they grow their career in sport. Here we talk about things like how they moved overseas or negotiated their salary or landed a new job or promotion, made a career change, and so much more. It's kind of like a little boost of inspiration in your inbox before the weekend. So if you're like us, you're career driven and you're keen to progress quickly, you're going to love the SportsGrad newsletter. To get it, head to sportsgrad.com.au/newsletter to subscribe or follow the link in the show notes. See you next time.